Hello, everybody. Glad that you could be here tonight. Welcome to the Travis Audubon meeting. This is the first time we've been together for a while. Really good to see everybody here tonight. My name is Clifton Ladd. I've been a member for about 40 years, a little over maybe. Been on the board, some committees. I'm on the advisory council. And totally thrilled to be able to introduce my friend Hesper Fang tonight. She's really, this is going to be awesome. Hesper is going to talk with us about her experience with falconry. Very ancient art. Hesper uses ancient techniques and modern techniques, modern technology. I've been looking forward to this night for a long time, and so I'm really glad we can all be here for this presentation. And welcome also to the people who are watching online, because still not everybody's here. We have a good turnout tonight. Very happy for that. The history of falconry can be traced back a few thousand years ago to China, Mongolia, Persia, and the Middle East. There's a lot we don't know about the history of falconry, but we do know that it was practiced at least 4,000 years ago. And while we're on the subject of history, can anybody tell me what month this is? Yes, Women's History Month. And now, we're all here tonight, fortunate to be able to hear Hesper, who I'm sure will also find her place in history as a practitioner of this ancient art. The earliest falconer that we know of, actually know the name of her name, maybe, I think this is right, it was Dame Juliana Berners. She's credited as being the principal author of a book published in 1486 titled The Book of St. Albans, and also known as the Book of Hawking, Hunting, and Blazing of Arms. She's also credited as the author of the first book in the English language on fishing, the art of, or treatise of fishing with an angle, which was also included in the 1486 book. And I think that Dame Juliana Berners and Hesper Fang are both pretty amazing women. I'm happy to know Hesper, who I met because of Travis Audubon and through our shared interest in birds. I've been fortunate to have met many wonderful people through this organization, and Hesper is one of the nicest people I know. It isn't just her knowledge and wisdom of birds that makes her so enjoyable to be around, but she's also a brilliant artist and musician. This is a sketch that she did of a merlin. But she's into a lot of other things too, like gardening and cooking. We have a shared interest in biology. She got her first college degree in marine biology and later went and got her Doctor of Physical Therapy at the University of North Texas Health Science Center. As you're about to find out, falconry is a sport that unites people and birds on multiple levels, physically, mentally, emotionally. Hesper is a natural for this sport and bonds with her birds on a deep and loving level. As birders, I think we probably all think about birds as special creatures, and most of us love to be in the field at sunrise when the birds are singing and the day is fresh and new. And now, speaking of sunrises, please welcome the wonderful Hesper Fang with her smile like a beautiful sunrise.
Wow, thank you for that wonderful intro. Hope I can follow that. Thank you so much for showing up tonight. I'm really excited to give you a talk about something that I've come to really enjoy. It's become one of my great passions in my life, falconry. I've got a really big talk ready for you tonight, so I'm gonna just jump into it to make sure I can get to it all. All right, so a little bit more about me. I was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Did my degree, of course, at UT Austin. One of my old professors is actually here tonight. It's an honor to have you, Dr. McMurray. I did marine and freshwater biology. And then after that, I went to grad school, and got my DPT, and now I work at a place called Carter Physiotherapy, which is right in the middle of town. And while I was in grad school, I joined the Fort Worth Audubon Society, which happened to have their meetings in the same building that I had my PT school. So I very quickly became one of those people who couldn't go anywhere without binoculars, and I started guiding some walks, some birding walks at Trinity River Audubon Center, and since then have been able to take some really, really cool trips around the world for the sake of birding with my lovely birding partner, Lino. There's a picture of us up in Peru, and we've been to Costa Rica, and to far west Yunnan in southwest China, which is one of the most biodiverse places in the world. And yeah, so the general trajectory of my relationship with birds in my life, and the general order that they showed up is, I started out with a love for pet birds, and this is a love that I shared with my college roommate, Lauren, who's here tonight. We snuck as many birds as we could into our college dormitory, which of course was no pets allowed. Then after college, I did a short stint at the Dallas World Aquarium in the avian nursery, which was my first experience to animal husbandry at a professional level. Then I became a birder, and got into, and then I desired a little bit more of a hands-on experience, and so I got into raptor rehab. I volunteered for several years at the Blackland Prairie Raptor Center, which is up in North Dallas, and it's actually one of the premier raptor facilities in the nation. And then I also had a little bit of a more traditional wildlife rehabilitation experience with another organization called North Texas Wildlife Center, who specialized in small songbird rehab. And then I got into falconry, and now I have chickens. And this is my pet parrot, Ruby, in the corner there, red eclectus parrot, and I bring her to work sometimes as a therapy bird. And these days, I wake up in the morning and go to sleep at night, and I'm just surrounded by birds all day, every day, and it's been beyond my wildest dreams. So my falconry journey started with a book called My Side of the Mountain by Jean Craighead George. And Jean Craighead George comes from a very important and historic falconry family. They're one of the first falconers in the United States to practice it. And she wrote this book, My Side of the Mountain, about a young boy who decides to leave society and go live off of the land, and he runs away to the mountains. And one of the ways that he figures out to live off of the land is to catch a baby peregrine falcon, an AS peregrine falcon, and raise it and teach it to hunt with him. And the falcon that he names Frightful becomes something of his companion and also his partner in the field. And so my elementary school teacher read this book out loud to us, and I was hooked just from a young age. I was a little kid, and it never left my mind. And then I grew up. I'm an adult now. I joined a Facebook group called Texas Falconry Apprentices, which is a great source of information. If anybody uses Facebook, they welcome new members all the time, and it's just a great information sharing kind of thing. And I realized that this is something that people still do. Like, they really do this in real life still. Like, you know, there are people among us who do falconry, and I was like, that is so cool. And then COVID hit, and it was a really weird time, of course, and I found myself with a lot of free time on my hands and kind of a sense of impending doom, right? It's like we're only here for a short time, and like you just got to do the thing that you want to do, because like you never know what's gonna come. So that led me to my first falconry meet in Eastland, Texas. Eastland is about 2 hours west of Dallas. There's not a whole lot there, but there's falconry meets there. And it was there that I met the person that would eventually offer to become my sponsor. There's a picture of me holding a Harris's hawk, which is the first falconry bird I ever came into contact with. From then I did my apprenticeship, a 2-year apprenticeship. I flew an American kestrel that I named Goji. And this past season, I was a first-year general class falconer, and I was able to fly a Merlin that I named Jujubee. And here's just pictures of my two birds that I've loved so much. Goji is on the left there, a little male American kestrel. I had him for 2 years. I flew him over 2 seasons. And Jujubee on the right there is my Merlin that was with me for 3 months this past season. So here's a general table of contents for what to expect at this talk, right? Because there's going to be a lot of information in here. So part 1, I'm going to talk to you about what modern falconry looks like, who does it, what it entails. Part 2 is going to be history. I'm going to try to go over a couple thousand years of history in just a couple slides, so hopefully it's not too boring. We'll go over the rise and fall of the public perception of raptors. It's very dramatic. Part 3, we're going to talk about falconry and conservation, which has really, really deep roots together. And we'll go over rehab and recovery of the peregrine falcon, and also at the very end, I'll address the impact on wild raptors, wild populations. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A session, so if you could just hold your questions until the end. I know there will probably be a lot of questions, and I hope that you're able to keep an open mind throughout this presentation on what falconry is and isn't, and at the end, I'll be happy to answer any questions. All right, so let's start with what people think falconry is. There's a lot of images that come to mind, right, when the word falconry gets thrown around, and maybe you've seen a falconry show at a Renaissance fair. Maybe they use falconry techniques and falconry equipment and falconry birds, but they're not really practicing falconry because falconry is not really for show. Maybe you've seen an educational event at a zoo or an aquarium that maybe uses raptors. These are educational birds. They're typically not being flown. Maybe you have a friend who identifies with the hawk as their spirit animal. This is also not falconry. Who wants to have a pet hawk? That's not falconry. Sometimes you see raptors as mascots at, the Philadelphia Eagles, I think, have an eagle mascot, and the Air Force have falcon mascots. And again, all these people use falconry techniques and equipment and husbandry and training, but they're not hunting with their birds. And then also in the popular culture, you see people with raptors sometimes doing their evil bidding, like the Hun in the middle of this, and landing on the shoulder, screaming menacingly at choice moments. And Harry Potter with his famous snowy owl who brings him letters, right? This doesn't happen in real life. So what is falconry then? Falconry has, in reality, a very narrow definition, and it's the pursuit of wild quarry in their natural state and habitat with a trained bird of prey. So falconry is hunting, and it's much more about the bird than about the person. It's what I consider to be a true hunting partnership, meaning that the bird is your hunting partner, your equals in the field. And when you're out there in the field, the bird obviously has agency. They can fly wherever they want. They can choose to stay with you, or they can choose to leave you forever. But they choose to stay with you because you offer them a hunting advantage. And this is a behavior that is occasionally observed in the wild, where raptors will learn to follow other predators as they travel through different terrains and different habitats, and then they'll flush prey for the raptors who come down and catch it. Sometimes you can see it in agricultural fields where birds of prey will learn to follow those big mowers as they mow the crops. And basically, in this scenario, the human just replaces those things. There are about 4,000 licensed falconers in North America. About 300 in Texas, and out of those, maybe only about half are practicing at any one time. So we're not a huge group, but we're there. In Austin, there are maybe 5 or 6 of us. And I want to emphasize that while the human, the falconer, loves and cherishes this bird, it's a one-way relationship, because these birds are social. They're not social in the wild. Outside of breeding and courtship, they really don't seek out the companionship of their own species or of other species. And so they don't love you But there's a sense of trust and loyalty. You know, when you're on the field, they're very responsive to you. They stay with you, just kind of like a dog would. They come when called because you've trained them to do so, and they know that it's advantageous to do so because they get food. But what keeps them around is not like any illusion of friendship or companionship. They're just there because they see you as something advantageous to have. And the moral of the story is they're not pets. They're not pets. They do not make good pets. All right, so if you want to be a falconer in Texas, and this is the reason why there's not that many of us, is because there's a whole list of things that you have to get through before you can become a permitted Texas falconer. First thing you have to do is find a sponsor, which is somebody who is willing to spend their time and energy to be your mentor for 2 years. An apprenticeship is 2 years, and you become, well, you become their apprentice, and you become their daily contact. They tell you what to do, and they're your mentor for the whole time. In Texas, federally, it's a 2-year apprenticeship. Then you graduate to become a general falconer for 5 years, and then altogether after that, after 7 years of practicing falconry, you upgrade your permit to a master permit. And all of those come with slightly different privileges. But most people practice generally the same way. Master falconers can fly eagles, for example, and most people will never fly an eagle. And then, anyway, so you obtain a sponsor first, somebody who agrees to be your mentor, and then you submit your paper application into Texas Parks and Wildlife. And then you wait for them to permit it, and then they send it back to you, and then you study for a 100-question written exam, and you have to pass with at least an 80. So this is, it was actually more difficult than I thought it was going to be. It covers all kinds of things: raptor biology, natural history, federal and state regulations, it's different per state, raptor diseases, what to look for, and husbandry, how to take care of them. And of course, another obstacle is that falconry books are rare. They're very difficult to find. Some of them are out of print. Some of them go on auction for like hundreds of dollars, and you're like, how am I supposed to study for this thing? But you do, and let's say you do, and you pass. And now you need to talk to the game warden and get them to come over to your house, and then they inspect everything, make sure that your equipment is good. They have got a checklist, and you pass the inspection, and then you have to sign a thing that allows the game warden to come to your house anytime they want to make an unannounced inspection. They've never done that to me, but that's what it says. And then after you do all of that, then you have to secure where you're going to do your hunting, right? Because it's a hunting sport, you can't just get a bird and keep it and not fly it, right? So you have to find a place to do the thing that you're going to do. And in Texas, we don't have very much access to public land. And so in Texas, we depend almost entirely on the generosity of private landowners who allow us to go fly our birds on their land. Here's an overview of the species typically that you see being flown in falconry. There's 6 main species. We got the American kestrel, red-tailed hawk, peregrine falcon, prairie falcon, and northern goshawk, and Harris's hawk. And out of all of those, the only 2 birds accessible to most apprentices to fly are the American kestrel and the red-tailed hawk, mainly due to the relative commonness of the species and the relative hardiness of those 2 species, and ease of finding quarry. And along with the bird, you have to gather all of your equipment, right? And the equipment is maybe the most important part of all of this, because the equipment has to be made properly and it has to be suitable to the bird that you're going to fly. And your responsibility to the bird as a falconer is to keep its feathers safe, keep its feet safe, keep it in all manners of good health. And so the equipment is very, very important, and falconers take great pride in their equipment. So we got bells, which the birds wear just in case they land in cover and you can't find them, because they're really, really good at camouflaging, right? We all know that birds can be right in front of you and they're really hard to see. If they have bells, then it makes it a little easier to find them. Jesses refer to the leather straps that you can hold on to that hang from their legs, so you can have a little bit of control over them. You've got the special raptor leash that has a swivel so it doesn't tangle. And a suitable perch. By the way, all of this equipment here this is like a touch tank for falconry equipment. So feel free to come up after the talk and you can touch all that stuff. There's hoods, there's leashes, and this is the perch that I kept Juju, my Merlin, on. You got your scale. You keep very close tabs on the weight of your bird. The hood is the hat that you see falconry birds wear sometimes. It obscures their vision and it acts kind of like blinders on a horse. It keeps them calm and it keeps them feeling like they're in a safe place. You got the lure, which is your way of calling them back. And the gauntlet is the name for the glove that you wear in your left hand, and the muse is the name for the enclosure that your hawk lives in. And I want to say that a lot of this equipment is handmade because not all of it is available to buy on Amazon. And most falconers enjoy making our own equipment, and we do it partly to keep old traditions alive. And some of the equipment that we use today is identical to equipment that you would see like in a museum exhibit from the 13th century Persia. And some of it is brand new, like some people use GPS on their birds now. And so there's a really cool mesh of old and new. And that's all I was going to say on that. And falconry also has almost our own language. Like there are entire falconry dictionaries with words and definitions. And I'm just going to give you a little overview here of some words that you might hear me use today. So in falconry, any bird that you use for falconry purposes is a hawk, regardless of taxonomic standing, right? It could be a falcon, it could be an eagle, or an owl, but if you use it in falconry, if it's your hunting partner, it would be technically correct to call it a hawk. And that is because falconry is older than taxonomy, it's older than ornithology, so the general term that's still in use today for any bird is hawk. And so you might hear me say hawk to refer to my kestrel or my Merlin. This is the context, right? So, and then in just further, hawking is the word for any activity that you do that involves hunting with your hawk. You're a bird of prey. You take your hawk hawking. Hawk poop is not called hawk poop, it's called mutes. So, mutes are raptor poop. Every morning after eating a big meal the night before, your hawk will cough up a pellet of indigestible material, just like an owl, and this is called a casting. And then every once in a while, you'll see them lift up all of their feathers and then shake them back down. This is called a rouse. Their tail feathers are not called tail feathers, it's called a train. And then after they eat, they have this habit of wiping their beak on whatever surface they're standing on. This is called feeking. And the words passage and haggard refer to first year or mature birds. So birds that have not yet undergone their first molt, or birds that are now in adult plumage and are part of the breeding population. So now you've gone through all of that, you've educated yourself, you've studied and passed your exam, and now you're ready to get your first bird. And there are two ways that you can go about this. You can trap one from the wild, or you can buy a captive bred bird. Now, most of the birds in North America used for falconry are trapped from the wild. And I want to address that we only take passage or juvenile birds, and we do not take mature birds from the breeding population. And there is an estimated, it depends on what paper you look at, but there's 75 to 90% mortality rate of young raptors in their first year that do not survive to adulthood. And the reasons I don't make it are varied. You've got collisions, emaciation, poisoning, illegal shooting, cat predation. So in the wild, they have a pretty hard life, and for a young raptor to make it to adulthood is really an impressive feat. But with a falconer, if you start with a young bird, with a falconer, you're able to get it through the first hardest winter of its life, and you're constantly flying it, you're getting it strong, honing its skills, and giving it free health care, and in the spring you release it, and it's a fully functional adult bird. So it has been proven that wild falconry take actually benefits the wild raptor population at large in several ways, and this is something that I'll address at the end of the talk. And this is a picture of me in Lubbock, Texas, after I caught Juju, my Merlin, in December of last year, and I'm kind of overwhelmed with emotion there because it's not an easy feat to trap a Merlin, and I Lino can tell you, I stayed up till like 2 a.m. many nights, like in anger, like making this thin net out of thin material, and just anyway, it was an experience. So now you have your bird. You have your bird in your house with you. Now training starts, right? The first step of training is called manning, and this is the beginning of the trust building process. This is when your bird starts to feel comfortable with you, starts to lose its fear of you pretty quickly because they realize that you're not going to eat it. And then after, that's the only thing they're afraid of, right? Realizes that you're not going to eat it, and then it's like, okay, what is this human doing in my life? And you start to establish a positive association with you, with your hands, with your movements. And so you do that by offering tidbits. And tidbits are little pieces of meat that you cut up, and you offer the tidbits on your fingertip. And sometimes you lose chunks of your fingertip this way in the beginning steps of the process, but the birds take to it really quickly. They realize that when you approach, that good things are coming, that food is coming, right? And so they learn to associate you with the production of good tidbits, like little pieces of meat that are easy to eat, and they're fast to eat, so they don't have to like look away from you to eat it. They just take it, and then they're like, okay, that's it. So once they're doing that, you try to get them to hop onto your fist. And that's the first step. Once they hop to your fist, that's the first step. Like something clicks in their brain, and it's like at that moment they realize that they're going to be an active participant in this relationship. Right? They're not just there to receive. They're going to be part of this. So now they're hopping to your fist. You slowly move your hand back, so eventually they're flying to you, and then eventually they're flying across the room to you. And once they do that reliably, you can move them outside on a string, a light string that we call the creance. And once they're reliable on that, then you can take them for their first free flight. So I've got a kind of a cool, if it'll load, I've got a cool video to show you here. One aspect of training, once you move it outside, is called lure flying, and this is it is entertaining, it is fun, but that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to build fitness in this bird and to assess its flying skill and see what kind of game you're eventually going to be able to catch with this bird. And essentially what it is you've got the lure on a string. Oh, I didn't show you this picture here. This picture here is Juju standing on top of her lure that's shaped like a starling. And you can see that lure on the table there after the talk if you want. So the lure looks like a bird. It looks like what you're going to want them eventually to catch, right? And it's kind of a cat and mouse game. So you've got your bird in the air, and you dangle the lure. They're coming into the lure, and then right before they catch it, you draw it out from their path. And so what they do is they loop back around, and then they try to catch it again, and then again you move it out of their path. So they learn very quickly to play this game, and they become very, very good at it, and they become better than you at it. It's really cool. They use all kinds of strategies. If it's a windy day, they'll actually use the wind to their advantage. They know that you can't feel the wind like they can, so sometimes they'll come at you really slowly, and then they'll really speed up at the last minute. Sometimes they'll actually find your blind spots. They'll come at you from like straight up over your head, or sometimes they'll fly straight into the sun so you can't see them. They'll use the sun as a blind and come at you straight from the sun, and you're like, where did the bird come from? And the bird's just like, this is easy. So this is a cool video that I took in the field one time. And in this video, it was a really windy day, and you can actually see Juju, the Merlin, doing full flips. She does a full back flip and a full front flip, trying to catch the lure. This is taken from a GoPro. So that's Juju in her hood. Oh. I'm not sure. So when I click on it, it takes me to the web browser, and then it doesn't follow the projector. This will be worth the wait, I think. It's a cool video. You wanna play with it? Oh man, I'm sorry about that.
Projectors.
Huh?
I don't think that was connected to the projector. Because you can see it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so. Yeah, the connection to the projectors. Not right.
Oh, well, that's too bad. So that may be, okay, that may be something that maybe they can send out the PowerPoint later. You can click through it and find it. But it's a cool video. Basically what she does is she's flying in the air, and it's a really windy day, and she lets the wind push her into a couple of back flips and front flips, and you can see like a full 360, like her feet are in the air and her head is under her. Yeah, well, maybe we'll send that link out later so you can see it. They do. Everything that we do with them is a mirror of their natural behavior in the wild. So they do that in the wild when they hunt. All right. So after all that training, now you've got your bird coming to you. You've been flying them out in the field, lure flying, building up their stamina and endurance, and now you take them for their first hunt with you. And this is the true nature of your relationship with the bird. This is your first opportunity to show the bird what your role is going to be. And your role is, you're not the hunter, you're the flesher. So it's like if you've ever gone gun hunting with like a spaniel. The spaniel is a flesher in that scenario. In this scenario, you're the flesher. So you're the one going into the weeds, using sticks to hit trees and trying to get game to move. Right? And because what they're trying to hunt is really good at hiding. They don't want to get caught. They don't want to be eaten, right? And so you walk through the field, or you do whatever you're going to do, and you move the small animals that are afraid of you. And then the hawk sees that, and then they learn to follow you for more chances at catching their natural prey. And in North America, a variety of quarry is pursued by falconers. You got ducks. People hunt peregrine falcons on ducks. Rabbits, squirrels, mainly people fly red tails on those. Doves and quail, upland game birds, small falcons typically go after these, and invasive birds like European house sparrows and European starlings. You fly small hawks at these birds, like goji. Goji was a great starling killer. These are all pictures from our first 2 seasons together. Goji killing a bunch of starlings. The daily routine, as a falconer, you've got your daily health monitoring. You pay really, really close attention to everything about them. Their feathers, their feet, the bottoms of their feet, their eyes, their talons, making sure they're sharp. And you become very, very well acquainted with their mutes. And if you remember from the previous slide, mutes are raptor poop. So making sure everything looks right, everything is healthy. You weigh them all the time. In the beginning, once every single hour, so you get an idea of their metabolism. So you become very well acquainted with how much food they eat, their rate of weight loss, weighing and portioning their food. You don't just give them food, you have to weigh the food, you have to know what you're feeding them, and they respond differently to different types of food also. And their food is whole small animals, so you can't just go to the store and buy a chicken breast and feed them, right? They need whole small animals to stay healthy. And then you have to incorporate your time that you're gonna actually take your bird out, flying them in the field, which includes driving to and from the field, and then doing the hunt. And then what if they don't come back, or what if they want to stay out for longer and they don't return? I compare it to having a part-time job. It's several hours a day of just dedicated hawk time. And that's also part of why it's not that common of a sport. So around the world, that daily routine, it looks pretty similar. There are differences, of course, culturally and traditionally in different species that are used in different countries, but generally speaking, the technique of falconry remains pretty consistent because the birds respond in a pretty consistent way. And so all of these pictures from around the world, falconry has a big presence in Japan, and it's the national sport of Qatar. And of course, you have the famous Mongolian eagle falconers, and everybody doing more or less the same thing. In 2016, UNESCO declared falconry to be an intangible cultural heritage, which is basically a way for us to identify this thing that needs to be protected as part of our shared human heritage globally. And again, my apprenticeship, I flew a sweet, wonderful male American kestrel named Goji, and he lived in the house with us. We shared a life with him for 2 years, and we removed together 75 starlings from the environment, which sounds like a lot, but if you think about how many starlings there are, it's really, it doesn't really make a dent in it, but we tried. We had 2 seasons together, and I was really proud of the fact that I was able to shelter him through Winter Storm Uri and also through the 2022 drought that we had last year, and both of which I'm not sure he would have survived, but I was very happy to have him with me in those times. And Goji is the reason that I had the exposure to be able to be invited to talk to you today, because I was invited to do a PBS segment for an online series called America Outdoors, and that's a video that kind of got spread around a little bit. And it was just a little interview, 10-minute video. If you're interested, you can go look it up on YouTube. It basically covers Goji's story and his release, and you can see me cry on camera. All right, little falconry humor for you. All right, we're gonna get into history here. First thing, these are all kind of cool. I think they're cool, but if you, I don't know, I hope you think they're cool too. This is a piece of pottery sherd, which is different from a shard. A sherd is a piece of broken pottery that's able to be traced to a specific time and site. So this pottery sherd is from the Tel Chur site, archaeological site, located in northern Syria. And what's remarkable about this is that it shows in that lower corner, it shows a human holding a raptor on his hand, holding quarry. And there's a little bit of debate among academic scholars as to whether this is really falconry or if this is just a guy holding some dead animals and a bird. It could be symbolic of something else, but we'll never know. Those people aren't around anymore to ask. But if it is falconry, and we think it kind of is, then this sherd is dated to 3000 BC. So that puts falconry at over 5,000 years old. Here is a remarkably preserved female mummy that was found in what is now Xinjiang province in northern China. And this is dated to between 400 to 200 BC. And she was found in a remarkable state of preservation with all of her ceremonial clothing. And on her left hand, you can see she's wearing an eagle gauntlet, a traditional eagle gauntlet that remarkably looks exactly the same in size and thickness and style to the eagle mitts that are used today in Kyrgyzstan and in Kazakhstan for the same purpose in the same region. So this is the general history of falconry, again, shrouded in mystery. Nobody really knows when it started. Clearly, at the time of that Tel Chur sherd, they were already practicing it. They had the techniques. It's estimated between 4,000 to 7,000 years old. And it either started in Central Asia or the Middle East. And in Central Asia, we know that they practiced it, but they were not record-keeping cultures, so nobody really knows how old it actually is. But we do know that it predates written language. We know that the earliest evidence is in cave paintings and petroglyphs, kind of in the Iran, Persian area. It predates agriculture and domestication. And originally it evolved as a way to procure food. And in the year 100 to 200 in Han Dynasty China, that's when you first begin to see a lot of evidence of falconry practiced in all the classes. You see it in the nomadic tribes, and you also see it in the upper classes and the nobility. And then it kind of spread as we have the Mongol conquest, the Huns invade Europe in the 4th and 5th century, and in the following centuries we start to see depictions of falconry in Byzantine mosaics, and then the earliest Arabian falconry treatise is found. And in the year 750, the first record of an Anglo-Saxon king is found practicing falconry. And then in the year 1100 to 1400 CE, this is the golden age of falconry, which coincides with the Islamic golden age in their explosion of science, art, and literature, and it becomes known as the European sport of kings. This is a really cool slide. This is my Women's History Month slide. In the 13th and 1400s, there was a woman named Eleonora of Arborea who was an avid falconer, and she held the high seat of judge on the island of Sardinia. And she was the one who enacted one of the first ever known legal protections for birds. And there was a law that protected bird eggs from collectors. And so today, the Eleonora's falcon is named after her in her honor. And so I just want to point out, I think this is really cool. Like, one of the first avian conservationists was not only a falconer, but she was a woman falconer. And then in 1486, the Book of St. Albans that Cliff mentioned is published, and it is a compilation of matters related to a gentleman. And of course, this is also by a woman, and it's got 3 chapters: hawking, hunting, and heraldry, 3 matters of interest to a gentleman. And this is the book where that famous passage comes from: an eagle for an emperor, gyrfalcon for a king. And it goes on, and it kind of shows the level of society that you are in and the bird species that you're apparently associated with. And you can see that the raptors that in this time in Europe are very much associated with nobility. They're very much prized hunting companions, right? They're very valuable. In the year 1518, King Henry VIII declared that if one was caught hunting on his land with a raptor, or if one was caught with one of his falconry birds and does not return it, then they should suffer the pains of death. So at this point, raptors are so valuable that they actually outweigh human life. But then all that changes in the 1700s when the shotgun is invented. And all of a sudden, humans have a much more efficient way to catch game, much more efficient way to procure meat for the table, and falconry falls from popularity. And hawks are now seen as pests and competition, something to be gotten rid of. And what's really interesting about this painting right here, this is from around that time era. You see that there's a shotgun right in the middle of the painting and a hunting spaniel right next to it, and you've got the game in the front, the hare and the partridges and grouse that they caught. And in the shadow, just behind the spaniel's legs, in the shadows, you can just see its head poking out, is a dead hawk. And then in the back, you see a little owl that's tethered, and owls aren't really used for falconry, and so this is a symbol of the raptor now being relegated to kind of a novelty, kind of a pest position. And then, of course, fast forward to the 19th century. Now you've got the Victorian era, and egg collecting is all the rage, and collecting bird skins and taxidermy mounts. And in fact, early ornithologists, it was really common for them to make their living selling these things because people were paying a lot of money for them. And John Crider, for whom the Crider's hawk is named, apparently, and this is a quote, thought nothing of collecting 50 red-tailed hawks in a single hunting season, or of collecting whole clutches of eggs and pairs of breeding birds. And this kind of grisly picture on the right-hand side there is from the Hawk Ridge migration, where 3,000 to 5,000 birds were shot every year by people who just did it for fun. And this was news to me. When I was researching for this presentation, I just learned this, that the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918 did not offer any protection to raptors until 1972. Can you believe that? So it wasn't until 1972 that people started valuing raptors again. Another funny picture for you. Happy Easter. Oh, it says, don't know, man, maybe they're complimentary appetizers. He's got the Easter bunny with eggs. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about conservation and how falconry actually helps the animals that we care about so much. So I told you a little bit about my history with wildlife rehabilitation. I've kind of seen it from both ends. I've been in a really high-end state-of-the-art raptor facility, and I've also seen how I think most of it is done around America, which is basically in people's homes, volunteer wildlife rehabbers. And this is true that many wildlife rehabilitators are not equipped or trained to properly handle raptors. They require a lot of specialized care, and they need a lot of space and a lot of time, and wildlife rehabbers, especially in the springtime during baby season, are inundated. They've got like 50 birds, and they just don't have the means to properly take care of a young raptor. And the thing is, a young raptor is really easy to quote unquote raise. I mean, if you keep it fed and you keep it warm, you can keep them alive until adulthood. And a lot of people think that's enough and that you can just release them after they've grown in all their feathers. But that's not really true. So in the wild, young birds are not necessarily born with the ability to hunt. That's something that they pick up from their parents and from a lot of trial and error. And in the wild, their parents actually keep them in their territories for 2 months, and they actually protect them, and they provide them with food whilst they're testing their wings and gaining strength and learning how to be a raptor. And so how falconers actually help with this process is that we take these rehab birds and then we fly them for a year until they're strong enough to hunt on their own, and then we release them. In many raptor facilities, and this is the best that most people can do with the time and money constraints and all the obstacles that wildlife rehabilitators face. But if they do a prey test, usually it's in an enclosure, and they use a laboratory-raised mouse. And if they can catch that laboratory-raised mouse in a closed space, then they deem that raptor is able to hunt and then release them. Right? But of course, we all know that's not the same being able to catch a laboratory-grown mouse in like a 4x4 chamber, right? And then it is to go out in a field and then catch a wild field mouse. It's much more difficult. So falconers can and often do assist in raptor rehabilitation. And I should say that all of the husbandry practices and all of the equipment comes from the tradition of falconry. And so I want to talk about the recovery of the peregrine falcon, because this is a big one. We all know that in the 50s and 60s that the population of peregrine falcons in North America plummeted dramatically, and it was so dramatic that there were no more nesting peregrines left east of the Mississippi River, none. And west of the Mississippi River in the west, there were only 20 to 30 pairs left estimated remaining in the wild, and that's all the peregrines that we had. And so a guy named Tom Cade, who was at the time the director of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and he was also a falconer, he started the Peregrine Fund in 1970. And it started as a way to collect the donations that he was getting, and then it evolved into one of the most important conservation organizations in the world today. But it started with falconers, and it remained mainly falconer-led up until about 5 years ago, when they started getting old and retiring, and the new generation is coming in. But it was one of Tom Cade's grad students who actually helped identify the link between DDT and the eggshell thinning that they were seeing, where the eggs would break before they could hatch. And there was another guy, Don Hunter, who was a lawyer and a falconer, and he was instrumental in helping the legislation pass that got rid of DDT. And one of the innovations that in the recovery of the peregrine falcon was that they learned how to captive breed them. And over the years, they were able to breed and release 4,000 individuals, peregrine falcons, that they released back into the wild. And what you see here is a guy with a falcon breeding hat. And this was one of the innovations this is one of the inventions that, they did a lot of experimenting. This was one of the only things that worked. They discovered that in order to breed peregrines in captivity, it needs to be an imprinted bird. So a young bird that was raised around humans thinks that it's a human and is attracted to humans, and you wear this special hat that the bird copulates with, and then it collects semen from the bird that you're able to use to artificially inseminate a female peregrine. So much respect for the sacrifice of these early conservationists. Over 28 years, they were able to release 4,000 peregrines into the wild, and it was one of the most successful endangered species recoveries in history. And in 1999, they were able to declare officially that the peregrine falcon was totally recovered and was taken off of the endangered species list. And today, it enjoys a status by the IUCN as least concern. I know I'm kind of running out of time here, so I'll just kind of breeze through. But Apple-mottled falcon is cool. We all love apple-mottled falcons. As Texans, we're very proud of our beautiful apple-mottled falcons. In 1952, the apple-mottled falcon was extinct from all of America. There were no more apple-mottled falcons anywhere in America. And the Peregrine Fund experimented with a couple of techniques. They also did captive breeding on the apple-mottos on a population that was imported from Mexico. Globally, apple-mottled falcons are doing just fine, but our northern population is the one that was endangered. So they brought in birds from Mexico. They used a falconry technique called hacking. So they built these platforms down along the Texas coast. Some of you may have seen them. And they use a method called hacking. It's an old falconry method where you take these young birds, keep them in the hacking box, and that becomes their nest site. They're analogous to their nest site that they would have in the wild. And they have this natural behavior of staying around for a month or two, right, in the parents' territory, like I said before. And there's a field crew that stays around there and protects them from predators and also gives them food support. So they leave food at the hack box. The young falcons associate the box with food, not the humans. And so they're able to fly around and exercise their wings and become familiar with the terrain for 1 or 2 months. And eventually they leave on their own, because this is their natural life history, right? They leave on their own and they become self-sustaining. We've got these artificial hack boxes and artificial nest boxes, which is a replacement for the lost mature yuccas that they normally would nest in. And 1,500 chicks have been released to the wild from the captive breeding program. And now, as a result, there's now once again a pretty stable wild breeding population of apple-mottled falcons on the Gulf Coast. There's ongoing difficulty with the scarcity of habitat because they really need unbroken grassland, which is a bigger problem that we all need to think about. The Peregrine Fund also saved the Mauritius kestrel, which at one time was the most endangered bird of prey in the world. They were down to 4 individuals, 2 in the wild and 2 in captivity, only 4 individuals. But they were able to, they snatched them all up and they did captive breeding and got more babies from them. And this is remarkable. The Mauritius kestrel actually evolved so narrowly because it lives on an island. It's a very, in the way that island species tend to be, very a specific lifestyle, and they evolved to eat this one tree gecko that became really hard for them to hunt because of invasive vegetation cover. And so the Peregrine Fund actually was able to teach these young kestrels to hunt other kinds of prey using different techniques, and the kestrels took that really well. And then they reintroduced these kestrels, and they were able to survive. And today, 800 Mauritius kestrels live in the wild due to the work of these people. They also do ongoing work with the California condor, not the California populations, but from the Grand Canyon into Utah. They've released about 100 individual condors, and they continuously monitor them. They trap them every single year, and they identified lead exposure as one of the main reasons that they're dying. Unfortunately, in 2022, they discovered that 87% of the birds that they had released were tested positive for lead contamination, which is really sad. And so now they focus their efforts on educating the public and trying to change legislation to ban the use of lead ammo in places where California condors live. And today, the Peregrine Fund is located at World Center for Birds of Prey in Boise, Idaho. It's open to the public. Anyone can come visit. They've got a really cool education center. They also share a building with another organization, a sister organization called the Archives of Falconry. This is like a museum dedicated to preserving the tradition of falconry, keeping it alive. They've got some really cool historical stuff. I don't think they have that mummy in there, though, but they've got some cool artifacts from the historical collections. I won't bore you with some more Raptor Research Foundation stuff, but this is another organization that was started by falconers, the first dissemination of Raptor research at the time when they were trying to figure out how to breed the peregrine falcon. And this was before internet and Facebook, right? So you couldn't just like shoot each other a text message. Didn't have any like text chains, right? So they communicated via journals. And this was the journal that they started, and today has grown into an international scientific, highly respected biological journal. North American Grouse Partnership today advocates for all, is the only conservation group that advocates for all 12 species of North American grouse, guided by science, public policies, on-the-ground management. They're a really good organization also. They were started in Tom Cade's basement by a group of 13 falconers. Okay, this is my last slide here. I want to address probably what is the most controversial aspect of falconry, which is the question of wild take, and what kind of impact it has on wild populations. And I just want to reference this scientific article by Braun et al. In 1977. They identified no measurable effect of wild take on any of the main raptor populations used for falconry. And again, this is from an article from a time when the raptor populations actually were in danger, but that danger was not from falconers. And from then to now, the sport of falconry has grown by maybe like 5%. And again, there are all these obstacles, and you don't have to worry about falconry becoming like the next big thing because it's pretty self-limiting. Anyway, in this article, I found it really interesting because they talk about different ways that that we could recover the peregrine falcon, and they identified 3 main ways. And the first one was to reduce the amount of DDT in the environment, which happened. The second one was to artificially increase the production of eggs and young via these different methods. One of the methods is to take the first clutch of eggs that a wild pair lays, and then that same pair will produce a second clutch. So now you have double the babies. And the second way, in point number 2, is that you could take captively laid eggs, the ones that are not affected by DDT, and then put them under wild pairs so that they can raise them as their own with wild parents, which is ideal. Third way is to hatch the young in captivity and then raise them and then release them with that captive hacking method that I talked about with the Applemotto falcons. And then this is the interesting point. This is the third point, and it says, I'm going to read this word for word. It says, the third means involves the techniques of falconry. Qualified falconers could take wild peregrine nestlings, train them to hunt, and release them after the first or second winter. Good falconers keep a higher percentage of young birds alive than occurs in the wild, and perhaps twice as many could be released as would be expected to naturally survive. So this was fascinating to me because not only did it say that falconry has no effect on the general population, but if used correctly, that it could actually increase the number of wild raptors. So this is the last slide. I want to end on a kind of personal note. All good things must come to an end. All the greatest gifts in life are temporary. And So these are my two birds that I've had and trained and cherished and then released over the course of 1 or 2 seasons. And Goji was trapped at 112 grams and released at 124 grams back into the wild, September 2022. And then Juju was released just a couple of weeks ago, like Merlin. Trapped weight was 238 grams and released weight was 252. Both of them, I hope, were better for their time with me and were released in good health and in fields that they were familiar with and that were full of game. And who knows where they are now, but hopefully they're doing all right. All right, so that was it. Thank you for staying with me for that whole big presentation. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them now. Yes.
How does it start out that you are releasing them and passing out that you come back?
Because they, again, they're not socially attached to you, right? So they don't view you as a friend. They view you as like a source for their next meal. And before you release them, you feed them a bunch of food, and so they're not hungry anymore. And you release them after giving them an especially big meal. And I should say that you don't handle them very much in the weeks leading up to their release, so they become less used to you, less accustomed to you, and less likely to tolerate your presence. And they revert kind of back to their wild state. And you can see as they become less food motivated, they start caring about you less and less. And then on the morning of their release, you feed them a big meal, and then you let them go. And then it's kind of like after you've eaten a whole pizza, and then you're not going to reach for another slice if someone offers it to you, right? So they're not motivated to come back to you for food anymore. Yeah.
I think that you had about 6 different species of fox up there as common ones that falconers use. Are the other ones that are not on that list used commonly, or why did they make the list?
The other ones are, sometimes you see people flying them, but not commonly seen. The Merlin that I flew is not on that list. Merlins are a little bit less commonly used, but there's still a devoted group of Merlin falconers that are kind of like their own group, right? And that's because I think Merlins are really difficult to trap, and well, they're difficult to find, as we've probably all seen one. I mean, before I tried to trap one, I've probably only seen like 2 or 3. They're there. They're very good at hiding. And I think their difficulty of locating and trapping is what keeps Merlins from the top 6 of popularity. Yes.
How do you go about trapping?
It's very difficult. It's a whole process. If you want to stay for another 30 minutes, I'll walk you through it. Basically, I think of it as like. You invite them out of the sky. Basically, you provide them with a meal that they can't refuse, like an opportunity, like, oh my gosh, like, I need to get that, like their favorite food on a silver platter, like in the perfect location, and then they come down. You can't just like reach in the sky and like catch one, you make them an offer, and then they accept that offer. They may not know exactly what they're agreeing to, but they come down, and then you've baited the trap with little monofilament nooses that their feet get stuck in. And then you're waiting like right there. Like it all happens like in like 30 seconds, right? If they're gonna come down, they come down really fast, and you're waiting right there, and then you rush in and free it, and then check it for parasites, and make sure that it's a young bird, right? Because you don't want to take from the breeding population. If it needs health care, then you give it what it needs, and if it's an adult, then you let it go immediately.
What's next?
So next, I've agreed to fly a bird for a friend. The bird belongs to a friend who's going to vet school next year and won't be able to have time to fly this bird anymore. And she can't release it because it's a captive bred bird. And individuals are not allowed to release captive bred raptors. And so this bird will be a falconry bird forever. It's a Alpamato falcon. It's a captive bred Peruvian Alpamato falcon that I'll be flying next year.
Did you put a tag on?
I did. Before I released Juju, I made a road trip down to the Gulf Coast to Gulf Coast Bird Observatory to get her banded, and so the chances are really small that she'll turn up again, but maybe she will, and if she does, then we'll have some data about where she went on migration and what happened to her. Yes.
You go hunting or falconing.
Hawking.
Hawking things. You mentioned like starlings. The bird, the hawks eat the starlings, but they also are trained to hunt rabbits or duck. I mean, how often do falconers actually use the birds to hunt for their own food?
On my first falconry hunt that I went to, that one back in Eastland, Texas, I asked that same question, and I got like laughed out of the room. Hunting is one of the least efficient forms of hunting. Falconry is one of the least efficient forms of hunting. We don't practice it today for sustenance. We practice it today for, the connection with a wild animal that you can't have in any other way. That unique connection with an animal that we live in this world with. But in terms of getting food for the table, there's probably better ways to do it. If your bird can hunt enough food with you successfully to feed itself throughout the season and throughout the summer where it doesn't hunt, it's only the winter and early spring that they do hunt, then that's a really successful season. Yes?
So kestrels are very small, right? Like male kestrels in particular. How did you figure out the appropriate hunting weights for yours?
Very, very diligent weighing and always being hyper aware and, waking up in the middle of the night in cold sweat and panic because you forgot to weigh your bird and, just constant monitoring. Goji only weighed 85 grams, which is like half of a hamster. Like he was tiny, tiny, tiny. And he caught starlings that weighed just as much as he did, and there was a weight that he would do that at, and if he was like just a couple of grams higher, he'd be like, nah, that's not worth it. So it's a lot of constant vigilance, and I've got the scale here. You can see it after this talk if you want. It's a tiny little scale. It's actually a kitchen scale that measures in increments of 0.01 grams. Yes.
Has anyone compared migration habits of wild raptors versus wild raptors that were released after
I know that falconers are really interested in that question, of course, and I'm not sure that there have been any scientific studies conducted, although there are reports. I know people who have experienced this where year after year their birds that they released would come back to the same fields and then hunt with them again, sometimes for like 5 or 6 years in a row. And so we have some data that released falconry birds do very well in the wild, at least much better than a wild nestling would have fared. But I'm not aware of any studies that have been done. I'm not sure that there are a big enough sample size for it to be worth studying. Although if there ever was, I'd be really interested in it. Yes? Sorry? Oh, anything that walks through fields. Sometimes they follow buffalo herds, and one cool thing that I read was that apalmado falcons will follow maned wolves in the wild in South America. And they learn that it's like a natural symbiotic relationship. They learn that they will see more small birds moved when another land terrestrial predator walks through. Yeah, and sometimes they flush birds for each other also. You hopefully have some very, very good friends that you appease with gifts and praise and typically if you go on vacation, if you can bring them, I would bring them. They have a little travel box, and because you're the one that knows them best, and technically speaking, if you leave, you're supposed to leave them with another permitted falconer, because regular person not holding a permit is not allowed to have a raptor or any part of a raptor, like feathers or anything, in their possession. So ideally, you have a falconer friend nearby that you can leave them with. All right, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Hesper. Come up and see all the falconry goodies up here. Thank you so